Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Q&A Social Security Disability Today. I am your host, Anthony Reeves, and as always, it's an honor and pleasure to have you with me on this beautiful day. All right, let me go ahead and get started. For those of you who've asked me a multitude of questions, let me apologize for the brief break. Took a well needed, deserved vacation, so now I'm back into the groove. As always, and I'd like to stress to you, if you have any other questions, keep the comments coming because I do get to them and I do make sure I address them to the best of my ability. As always, you can always subscribe to my blog, which is legalbeat.anthonyreeves.com. You can always visit me on my website at www.reevesfirm.com. Of course, for those of you who've never seen my monthly talk show, go to definitely check me out at Blog Talk Radio / in the know, INTHEKNOW. And as always, if you have any personal, straightforward questions, you can always email me at anthony@reevesfirm.com. Now that we've gotten the formalities out the way, let's make it do what it do and get right to the question. All right, first question I have is bringing up additional medical conditions during the disability process. I have a gentleman here who asked me the question. He was in the process of his disability case, and his mom reminded him, I guess, about some surgeries that he had done on his knee previously, and they're in the middle of the disability process, but it's happened several years ago. So his question really is, should he even bring that up? Okay, here's one of the things that I tell people all the time, because sometimes it's very easy to want to go back remotely. You have to ask yourself two fundamental questions. One, when did your disability occur? Meaning, if you're saying your disability began in 2009, but then you want to tell Social Security about a condition that existed in 1999. How relevant is that? So that's why I always tell people focus on the date of when you indicated you became disabled, and that'll give you a bigger indication. Because let's think about this for a second. If you worked for years and you've never had a problem, and then all of a sudden you got disabled on this date, and then now you're like, oh wait a minute, I had all these problems way back in the day. That information from a historical standpoint may be helpful, but may not be overly useful. So you have to kind of ask yourself, look at when you say you became disabled in relation to the evidence that you want to bring forward. Now here's the other part that you also have to kind of keep in play. How does what that condition you had back then play a part to your disability now? Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have a learning disability and you apply for disability and you say you became disabled today. Well, if you're 30, 35 years old and they ask the question, have you had problems with learning in the past? And you're like, yeah, I was in special needs classes, I got held back. Well, then guess what? Those records from back when you were in high school and junior high school are going to be useful to demonstrate that you had the existence of this condition that manifested itself during the entire time period. Remember, this is all relative to the weight of all of your medical evidence, but the simple answer is this. You really need to ask yourself the question, how relevant is that prior piece of medical evidence to your current application for disability benefits? If you indicated that you've got a bad back and all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, I had surgery on my foot 20 years ago, but you've never had a problem with that foot, never had a follow-up with that foot, you haven't even alleged that your foot is a problem now, then if you bring that information back in the past, how is that really going to help you with your case? Because you're basically saying there's nothing wrong with your foot now for purposes of your disability. So why do you need to have that information? Now, I always tell people this. Social Security is not going to turn medical evidence away because they want to consider the weight of all of your medical conditions. But kind of keep it in its proper perspective, meaning look at what you're saying is disabling you and ask the question, is what happened previously relevant to your disability application now? So that's the first question. All right, now the second one is kind of long. And it's one that I'm kind of surprised that somebody hadn't asked this sooner, but I want to thank the young lady who asked me this question. It's about the award notices. Okay. A lot of times what happens is when representatives assist you with your case, their responsibility is to help you get disability. Most representatives, as an added perk, will help you go over your award notices. And to be honest, that's really beyond the scope of their practice because once they've gotten you disability benefits, they're done. But as an added bonus, they kind of walk you through because there's still things you don't understand. The award notice can be extremely confusing. The reason why it can be extremely confusing is because you're getting this document that actually explains everything that goes down in your programs. Now let's kind of start from the very beginning. First of all, if you have what we call a concurrent application, that means an application for DIB and an application for SSI. You're going to find yourself being confused because the two are going to send you, two different agencies within Social Security will send you award notices for those particular aspects of those programs. I always tell people that the standard for disability is the same for all programs. How you get paid is different, meaning if you get approved under disability, then they have to break out and go to the technical portions. So in this young lady's instance, she was awarded supplemental security income. She was also awarded disability insurance benefits, which means she had a concurrent application. So she got two programs. So first she got the SSI. So here's the first question she asked. It talked about the eligibility rules. It basically says, under our rules, we do not allow you to pay you SSI until the month after you meet the first of all eligibilities. Therefore, the first month is August of 2009. Now, here's the thing: this is the thing under SSI. SSI, either you can get paid based on the date of your application, that's when they start paying you, or the date of disability if it's after the date of your application. So let's say, for instance, you applied for SSI and you say you became disabled, you applied today, but then you say you became disabled in 2010. Well, if they approve you today, are they going to pay you back to 2010? No, because under the SSI program, you don't become eligible to the month, the first day of the first month after the date of your disability as it relates to your application. So let me kind of back it up again. Let's use the same example. Let's say you said you became disabled in June of 2010. You applied for SSI in January 13th, 2011. Now, if they say you're approved for SSI, when does your SSI begin? It begins on the first full month after the date of the disability, depending on the onset date they determine. So I know I'm throwing a lot of confusing things. Let me see if I can make it simpler. Let's say SSI says you were found disabled June of 2010. When do you get paid? Remember, SSI, you can only get paid based on the date of the application. So that means even though you were found disabled in June of 2010, you can only get paid starting in January of 2011. But remember, they only pay you at the first of the month, which means what? Which means you get paid the first month of benefits February 1st. So you follow me the example. In that example, SSI found you were disabled in June of 2010. You applied January 13th, 2011. You don't become eligible for benefits until February 1st, 2011. Well, let's say you applied in January 2011 and you said you became disabled in June of 2010, but they found you disabled in March of 2011. When do you get paid? Well, let's say that they say you were found disabled March 13th, 2011. Remember what I said about that first date? The first of the month? That would mean that even though they found you disabled, you don't get the benefit of your application because they found you disabled after the application. But you don't get paid in the middle of the month of March. So your benefits would be starting April 1st. I know it's confusing. If I need to do it again, and I'll do one specifically on award notices. If you have a question, send me an email or send me a comment and say, will you do one just specifically on award notices? And I'll be more than happy to. Now, another question with regards to award notice. She was asking the question about the categories. Category A, living in a home with a household, living in your own household. Category B, you're living with someone else. She's confused because she's living in the home with her mom, and it looks like they still have her in category A, which means she's living on her own. Now, this sometimes, and this is kind of weird, you may need to contact Social Security to see if they have you categorized as living on your own or with your mom, because sometimes that happens. Because the reason why they want to know that is if you're living with someone else, that person's resources are deemed to you. In other words, you're considered to be getting the benefit of those resources. Let me give you a good example. Let's say, for instance, you were living with Oprah Winfrey and living in her house. It's kind of wild, but think about it. She's taking care of all the bills. You have nothing to worry about in terms of place to stay. They're going to look at her resources and they're going to say, you're not going to need as much help as someone who's living in a house who has to pay rent. So keep those things in mind. So the reason why it's confusing to you is because it may be possible that they have it calculated that that is your own household. So you need to contact Social Security about that. And this another one talks about. It talked about here. Let me see. We use income to figure out your eligibility and benefits by law. We use different rules. It talks about unearned income. Now she said she hasn't worked since '07. Here's where the unearned part pops up, and I tell people be careful. When you are applying for disability, the disability portion of your program has an impact on your SSI portion, and they treat that as income and resources for when you receive SSI. Now I know that sounds goofy, but think of it like this: if you worked and you paid into the system, and the Social Security on that side determines you're going to get a lump sum of money, SSI determines you're going to get a sum of money. You got two different sums here. On the one hand, they're going to count the money from your DIB portion against your SSI portion. That's what they mean by there for purposes of unearned income and unearned income. So don't be confused when you see that. Okay? Finally, it talks about the fact of the medical review as well as the SSI. Remember, this is where it gets really weird. And this is why people who have concurrent applications always get confused, because the two programs kind of offset each other. Remember this: when you've been found disabled, you're entitled to both programs unless one program cancels the other one out. If your DIB program cancels out your SSI program, then you won't get SSI anymore. And you're like, well, how does that happen? Well, what happens is that if you're getting more money from DIB than you will be from SSI. Remember, you've been found disabled. So until the two programs kind of wash themselves out, you're eligible for both programs now. So that's why they're telling you this now. Okay? Now, like I said, I know I'm rushing through a lot of, I know it's kind of complicated. And like I said, if you need me to address the awards notice, because I know I've had to do this a lot of times, I'll be more than happy to do a video just on that one. All right, last question. May 1st, gentleman actually got concurrent application, and he wants to know in response, he's actually asking a question in response to my May 1st video where I was talking about how does Social Security calculate the back pay when you get approved for both SSI and SSDI. And he wants to know, is the real question is the 7,000 in back pay, is that going to be a hit against your resource limits? In theory, no. Let me tell you why. Think of it like this: that back pay is really treated as if, first of all, that back pay is money you should have been receiving anyway. So it's kind of, they're not going to hit you for money they should have given you already against your resources. So you should be fine. Oh, one more question. Sorry. Someone asked me, can you tell me about SSDI and bipolar disorder involving periods of elevated or irritable mood alternating with periods of depression? Here's the thing you need to know about mental health conditions in Social Security, as well as particularly bipolar disorder. It all depends on the medical records. Each condition that you have is treated differently. By mental health conditions, they're going to look at a variety of different things. They're going to look at the medication you're taking. They're going to look at who you're going to see for treatment purposes. Are you using any type of illegal substances? Are you being compliant with your medical treatment? How do you respond with crowds? How do you respond under stress? How do you respond in terms of confusion? How is your memory? They look at all of those things collectively to determine whether or not your mental health condition affects your ability to work. And they look at the periods of irritability. They look at whether or not you have mood swings, and they want to know how would that impact your ability to do work. So I hope that answers your question, but it's important to remember for purposes of disability determination is that they look at all of those things collectively to try to make that decision. All right, my apologies again for the delay. I know I haven't done this video in a couple of weeks, and I know I went through a lot. I hit through a couple of these topics as quickly as I could. Again, if you need me to go over any in detail, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to do so. Have a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed another edition of Q&A Social Security Disability Today.